This is a National Panasonic R-450 transistor radio, 4-band AM and 3 shortwave bands. It's got pretty much continuous coverage from 530 kilohertz to 26 megahertz. This appears to be a rather early example of this type of radio. I think it was produced sometime in the early 1960s based on the conservative styling of the radio and, you know, the way the dial is reverse painted and that kind of thing. You know, the features and the components inside the radio suggest that it was early 1960s. As you can see, I have the chassis of this all torn apart on my bench here. I'm doing some servicing on it. When I got this radio, I bought it from an estate sale that my radio club was having. I guess they were clearing out an estate that somebody had donated to the club, so they were selling various pieces. You know, there were several hundred pieces that they had to get rid of. This was one of them. I think I paid like $30 for this, and normally wouldn't pay that much for something like this, but this radio was in really awesome condition. It's almost looks like it was brand new. There's no cracks or anything. It's missing one piece of trim. Looks like it's missing one piece of trim on the bottom, but other than that, it's in really awesome shape. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to give you kind of a brief history of the branding of these radios, because Panasonic went through several different eras in which they branded their radios a little differently. When they first started out, they were marketing radios under the name of their parent company, which was Matsushita. And Matsushita, you know, that's a little bit hard to pronounce for Western people to pronounce. It's a Japanese name, and it doesn't particularly roll off the tongue. And here's an example here of a Matsushita branded radio. You can see that it's branded Matsushita. It's made by the same company that makes all the Panasonic stuff. A company called Matsushita Electric Industrial Company in Japan. Now, because Matsushita didn't sound all that great for a brand name for marketing in Europe and United States, what they did instead was they began marketing radios under the national brand name. And here's an example of a national branded transistor radio. Again, it's made by Panasonic, just like you would expect. And you can see it's branded with national. Now, that didn't last very long, because there was a company, actually two companies, electronic companies, that were doing business as national already in the United States. One of them was a company that made shortwave radios, so they were kind of in direct conflict with marketing radios under that brand name. So what they did as a compromise is they began marketing radios under the National Panasonic brand name, which you see here on this R-450 radio that I'm working on. And that probably kept them out of trouble as far as trademarks go, but I think there was still some confusion as to who was actually making the radios. So they eventually dropped the National, at least in North America, and just simply marketed their stuff as Panasonic, and that's the name that they've kept up to the present day. Now, in this case, the R-450, I've torn this thing apart. When I first got it, it didn't play at all. There was no sound coming out of it. You could just barely hear a little bit of hiss when you turn the radio on. But there was no stations that you could get or anything. Now, what I did, I checked all the transistors and all the diodes. There were a couple of point contact diodes in there, and there were I believe 8 germanium transistors that are in this set, and they all checked out good, so there's nothing wrong with the active components. However, the capacitors, there's a number of electrolytic capacitors in this set that didn't look all that hot visually, and the radio is probably at least 50 years old anyway, so generally what you would do, you have to assume that the capacitors are probably not that great, so I wound up replacing them, and here they are in this box. And upon checking them, I discovered that there was one that was pretty much open circuit. That means it wouldn't pass a signal at all. Whatever the function was, it wasn't going to pass any AC. And there were, every other one of those was leaky, which means that instead of behaving like a capacitor that blocks all DC, they were behaving more like anywhere from a 50 to 100 k ohm resistor in the circuit. So those capacitors had to go, and you can see on the board that I replaced them with modern equivalents. They're the same values and everything. You can see right here there's a couple of brand new caps on that one. There's a couple of caps underneath the board. Let's see. Hard to see it, but you can see there's one there. So there's a total, I think, of about 11 or 12 caps that needed to be changed. And fortunately, unlike a lot of other sets that the Japanese made, this one they at least gave you enough cable length to remove the board, to lift up the board without having to unsolder too much. And so I was able to just unscrew this and lift up the board enough that I was able to change all the capacitors. So, in any case, once I did that, I was now able to apply power to the chassis on the bench. And what I did was I hooked a speaker up here, and I didn't use the built-in speaker because it's kind of awkward to hook it up. And I have my bench power supply here. It's set to approximately 6 volts. 6.4 is fine for this. The batteries are probably going to supply just about that much anyway. This runs on 4 D cells, and the current drain, like many germanium type radios, germanium transistor radios, the current drain is very, very low, so a set of alkalines on this radio would probably last several hundred hours before they would need to be replaced. Anyway, we've got this all hooked up. with the speaker and the power from the bench supply here. That's confirmed that nothing's shorting out or anything. Okay, so now we're ready to turn the radio on. And I'll turn it on. This is kind of interesting because instead of most of these things, you would turn the radio on and you were turning it on with the volume control. This one, they use the tone control to turn the radio on. The volume control is the inner pot. So I'll turn this on, and we get nothing. Now, there's a reason why we get nothing, and I discovered this while I was playing around with this. The reason why you get nothing here, is because you must have, there's a tuning indicator here. It's a little meter that I'm showing you right now. You must have that hooked up into the circuit or the radio won't play. It'll just give you a little bit of hiss, and that's it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hook the meter up. I'll turn the volume down. Now bear in mind, this radio didn't play at all when I first powered it up. And now we're getting...
Is if you're going to help somebody, don't make it so obvious.
So that they get in the next budget, right? So it was just a temporary 6-month job. I thought I was getting a keeper.
Ellie involved in that crash and had a rollover.
이혼 절차에 들어갈 것으로 한다고 밝혔습니다.
The top.
Nowhere to be found.
Patient's needing a blood transfusion. I need blood to get back to the community because if
as you can tell, I'm tuning it.
Things slick for the morning. From the Times Weather Center, I'm Kevin Eubank.
Right now it's cloudy and 20 degrees in downtown Salt Lake. This portion of Utah's afternoon news brought to you by the Utah Symphony.
Wow, Utah. I'm in California. That's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, you're with it. I don't live in there. But I respect what you and the others say. It's so...
I don't believe that he's staying at a hotel.
Okay, it plays pretty well on AM. So we'll try it on the shortwave band.
For the changing lives, changing the nation.
One of the things that's...
5151. Point of view working for you.
This work, this church, and
you can catch another Real Life with Jack Gibbs television program.
And the at-risk population.
Of course, we had a Republican presidential debate this week. And in the second, we want to spend some time talking, as we always do, about religious liberty. We have a link here, so if people missed the opportunity...
Okay, anyway, you get the drift. It works fine on all the bands. Very nice. Little bit of surgery there. It took me probably 2 or 3 hours to do this, to get all the caps changed and everything, and it made a world of difference in the performance. You know, like, I'm not sure if the switches really needed cleaning, but I did a little cleaning of them with deoxit. And all in all, I would say this is a very successful repair. Considering that this radio did not play at all when I started, this was quite good. The outcome is very nice. So I will button this up. I'll put it back in the cabinet, you know, reconnect everything, button it up, and I'll consider this one to be a successful repair. The radio sounds pretty nice.